I also have another question related with the school system. So we talked about how gamification can be employed or by whom in terms of educational content. But what do you think about implementing gamification tools and techniques also in examination, in tests, in other, let's say, operations that school usually run? They're not just lessons or lectures.
Okay, not only for teaching, but for other activities.
No, I mean, yeah, not for teaching, but I mean also test or examination
Yes.
are part of teaching. So they're completely different, I guess. I don't know how much it's implemented already in terms of testing. Yeah.
That's a very interesting question. And it goes back to things being systematic. If you say, for example, you teach your students using a game and all their actions and learning by the drill learning, say learning by repetition, by playing the game, designing strategies and writing a diary log of what they're doing, and if all is connected at a certain point to a game, and the assessment is a normal exam, there's a disconnect between your teaching practice and your evaluation. You don't, and going back to sport, if you're teaching, say you're teaching basketball in your school, you don't evaluate what they learned by writing an exam. You evaluate them by how well they play or how they follow the rules when they play, actually play, not writing in a paper. So there's that kind of disconnect sometimes between the practice, the teaching practice, and the learning practice, and the evaluation. You can perfectly evaluate using the game. You just need a rubric, or you just need to make clear what you want them to be able to do. So, say for example, I'm using storytelling. I use storytelling, creative writing a lot in my English classes. When we get to the exam, the exams are connected to that. So they're going to be doing an exercise in creative writing. And in that writing, with all the cues I gave them in the exam, they're going to be using all the grammar they learned, but also all their creativity. So it's an exam, it's a written exam because they've been writing. If I have them building houses, like building houses in cardboard, for example, when we're teaching the vocabulary of the house, if I want to evaluate them, I'll have them build something. Because that's what they've been practicing. If you're practicing kicking a ball, you cannot be examined by doing something else. Because it's not connected.
Okay.
It can be done. Many people do it. They go all the way through gamification and they have an exam. That's fine. If they know what to expect from the exam. Say, for example, you've been using gamification for memorizing things, like because you're using them all the time. Sometimes gamification is all about repetition. You learn by repetition because you play many games and you do the same things, same context, but different tasks, but you're using the same skills and the same knowledge. So the idea is they get that knowledge in their heads. You can try and test them out of that context. It's better if it's in the context. You can do it outside, yes, you can do it outside. But because they've been having fun for a while, then you have that. Maybe you need to make very clear from the beginning that even if teaching is like this, evaluation is going to be like that. So you need to be prepared for that.
And yeah, and that's my doubt, let's say. So in that case, I have two questions related with your answer. So one, it's in case of, let's say, internal examination. So during the periods, you just have to assess, students. And so you have like periodically some examinations, tests, and that you can do it with G.A.M.E, with gamification, if, as you said, it's related with the context. But there are also kind of examination that are related with passing an year or receiving the diploma or like certificates, etc. And these ones, do you think it could be maybe not now in a recent future, but maybe later, actually implemented in a more, how to say, recognized or certified way also in the examination process of schools, because then you receive, you know, what are the question of the exam, what are the topic to learn. You can choose how
that's more
to
complicated.
the things. So you just receive papers and teachers give that to students. That's at least you don't have any, you say, adaptability there to do it.
Yeah, that's more complicated. Well, like I said, when you're designing your system for your class, like when you're choosing your methodologies, the first thing you do is you analyze the context, your educational context. Having a final exam, like we have when we finish upper secondary school to go to university, is part of the context. If you know you have that kind of exam, and there's nothing you can do because they have to take that exam, that's part of your design. You take it into account when you're designing your year. So even if you want to use gamification, you need to, or game-based learning, you need to know that they need to be prepared for that kind of exam. So it's not like you're doing gamification all the time. You could, but you don't have to. You may gamify certain parts of your teaching. You may use games as support for content teaching or content learning, but you know that in the end there's that kind of exam, and it would be very unprofessional for a teacher not to know that and to work towards that. So it's kind of a balance there. If you want to use game-based learning or gamification, when you know your students have that kind of exam, you need to be very sure about it, about what you're doing, and not neglect that the exam, the type of exam, because it's going to have questions posed in a certain way, and they're going to expect something, and that's part of your design. If you can design a system that takes that into account, incorporates it, and makes it work, perfect. But it's not fair for your students that if you know they have that kind of exam, you don't work towards that. Even if you're, because for using gamification, it's the most important thing. You need to be very sure that what you're doing is better than not doing it. So if you want to add a game or a gamified system to your teaching, you have to be very, very sure that it's going to be better for your students than other kind of teaching methodologies. If you're not sure about that, it's better not doing it. Because we're not paid for experimenting with our students. We're paid for helping them learn to the best of their abilities and the best of their potential. If gamification helps us guide our students to a better performance, I definitely say go for it. If we're not sure about it, we have to be very careful. Because in the end, we're teachers or social workers, and we're paid for helping our students or helping people to the best of their abilities. In that case, it's an external exam. We have that in Spain. Pretty sure that happens everywhere. So we have to make sure our students are prepared to their best for the exam. If gamification helps, perfect. If it doesn't help, just move it out.